Do we remember how to do this?
What are we doing again?
I don't know. What are we doing again?
You said something about wrestling and talking about it.
Uh,
I was like, I guess. I
yeah.
don't.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We got the band back together.
Yeah, yeah. Just another victim of the pandemic, right?
Right.
That's
Uh,
what we'll go with.
sure. Welcome. We're I affectionately titled this Kris and Matt's Wrestling Podcast 2.0. And yeah, we're back at it, man. How's it going, Matt?
Yeah. It's just, well, I mean, before yesterday evening, things were great. We're going to get into it, but
Yeah.
it's pretty crappy day for wrestling fans right now.
Right. Yeah, totally. So last week, Matt came over. We watched a couple wrestling matches for my YouTube channel, and we were kind of bantering about, and he kind of put out there that he maybe wanted to get back into wrestling podcasting, and I thought, so I hit him up yesterday, and like, were you serious about that? Because I kind of want to do something with you again on a regular basis, and I thought it would be a good idea to get us started here, just to kind of give like people who may not know, our background and the initial version of our podcast and stuff like that, and just kind of like give people a primer for what they can kind of expect here on the old Kris and Matt's Wrestling Pod
2.0.
2.0. Yes, exactly. So yeah. Obviously, I'm Kris, and that's Matt, and we're both lifelong wrestling fans, and we've been friends now for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's 20 years was
yeah.
when I moved down to this area. So,
So,
whew.
so yeah. So we've been, like I said, we've been friends for 20 years, and one of those things that made us become actually strengthened our friendships because we became friends before either one of us knew that the other was a wrestling fan. We would usually just talk music and hockey when we were working at the old Doug and Ted's Foodland grocery store. And then one day, I don't even remember how the subject got brought up,
I
but
don't either. No
we're,
idea.
we're like, oh, you like wrestling? And I was like, yeah. You like wrestling? And you're like, yeah. And then from then on, it was like, that's pretty much all we talk about is wrestling with each other. Um, and yeah, and so what was it
Well,
like?
and I think it's important to point out too. It's like we live in a kind of a small town. It's small town America. So like having a wrestling friend that is nearby that's as into it as you are was like, man, like I really want to hang out with this guy because I have someone who gets as excited and thinks about it as much as I do.
Yeah,
And you mentioned hockey. We could find a million people to talk Red Wings hockey in 2002, 2003.
right.
But having someone that we could, sit down and watch wrestling with, and hey, have you seen this match? And let me, turn you on to this stuff that maybe you haven't seen before was really it. Like you said, it strengthened our friendship, and it makes wrestling better when you have friends to watch it with. It's just better.
Yeah. It's definitely it's one thing, over, especially over the last couple of years. I've cultivated few more friends online. That to talk wrestling and stuff with, but there's something about when you can, when the person, and it's you can talk, we don't get to see each other face to face as much as we'd like to, but when we do, like it's something totally different when you can do that in person with someone, and like you said, and they're in as deep as you are with it.
I mean, for not to out you right away, but like we were at the Raw where Shane McMahon came back.
Yes.
And as awesome as the experience was of being there when Shane came back, for me, I always remember your reaction.
Yeah.
And I describe it as a 9-year-old kid who got the PlayStation 5 for Christmas. You were elated.
I was.
You were so excited. But having that memory makes Shane McMahon's return that much more like, man, that was such a good time. And Chris was so into it. And like, just that adds to it. So.
If only I knew. If only I knew what the next 5 or 6 years of Shane McMahon would look like, I probably wouldn't have been as excited. But in that moment, man, that was cool because I like
it was iconic.
Yeah.
That's a moment that like wrestling fans are going to remember forever. And we were in the building and still one of the 2 or 3 loudest reactions I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So yeah, we've gone to countless events together. I think everything from WWE, ROH, in TNA, and as of this last summer, we went to Blood and Guts too. So yeah, we've been to pretty much all 4 major companies that have been around since we've been friends. So
yep. And one of the Ring of Honor shows we caught was New Japan Pro Wrestling co-branded. So
yeah. That was like 2017. Yeah, 2017.
Yeah, it was the War of the Worlds in Dearborn where the Bullet Club was there.
Yeah, it was.
And Tanahashi wrestled and.
Yeah, it was 2017, and then the year after. Yeah, because you didn't go the year after that when they went to Royal Oak. That was just me and Daryl that went to that one. Yeah, so yeah, about 4 years ago now. We decided, because it was in the lead up to WrestleMania in New York, the Becky, Ronda, Charlotte main event.
Yep.
Was that 35? Yeah, that sounds right. WrestleMania 35.
Vince got what he wanted. I can never remember the numbers anymore. I just remember it's WrestleMania in New York. So
there you go. But yeah, in the run up to that, Matt and I just decided that we were going to start talking about wrestling on microphone. And so for pretty much every Wednesday, with a few exceptions here and there, all the way through, up until the pandemic, Matt would come over to my house around lunchtime and sit and talk wrestling for, 45 minutes to an hour, depending.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. It was, it didn't matter really, it wasn't about how many people were listening or not. It was, for me, it's always been about having so many ideas about wrestling and just needing to get them out into the universe.
And like texting back and forth is great, but as as a parent too, you get in the middle of a text conversation and something pops up and you walk away, you lose your train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice too, like throughout the week when I think of something to be like, I'm going to put that in the back of the head to talk on the podcast this week. I don't need to text him right now. We can talk about it. Mm-hmm. We'll do it live.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah, no, yeah. That was one of the cool things where, we would text one each other about something and the other one would go, save it. Save it for the pod. And so, yeah. So, and then, like I said, we did that for, all the way up through, February of 2020. And so a little over, right around a year. And then the pandemic happened and we tried doing a couple over, this is before I got all my stuff to start, doing my own videos on YouTube and podcasting and stuff like that. We tried doing a couple over the phone, and it just wasn't the same. And it was tough because, the wrestling that was on TV, there were no crowds, and it just wasn't, it wasn't the most important thing at the moment either. And then my wife and I had our child, and it's just been kind of not really in the forefront for either one of us until you kind of floated it out there last week. So
yeah, and I admit, and this will be a theme as we keep going, like I don't watch the weekly WWE product anymore. I haven't sat through an episode of Raw or SmackDown in couple years.
Mm-hmm.
If the viewers and listeners want to hear why, some of the old episodes you can hear the anger in my voice as things like Bray Wyatt and Seth Rollins and Hell in the Cell like just kind of slowly turn me away from the product. So like I wasn't as invested in it. And lately, I still haven't been watching every week, but I've been keeping up more. And the bloodline stuff with Sammy is just, I've been a Sami Zayn fan for years. Like, that's kind of piqued my interest in WWE a little more. And I'm still watching AEW, not as religiously as I was, but that fire, I guess, is back a little more
Yeah.
about wrestling, and I care more. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
really looking forward to being able to talk about it again, and hopefully through this, it gives me a reason to get deep into WrestleMania season.
Yeah. And it's funny is if you go back and listen to those old episodes, which you can find on all your favorite podcast platforms and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that. Um, I was always, especially once the Wednesday Night War started. I was Mr. NXT. I was Mr. I was for years. Matt can tell you, I waved the WWE flag hard for years, and over I don't know the last I can't even pinpoint now when I kind of just gave up. Um, but it's been at least a year now. It might have been the Rumble last year, to be honest. That might have been the
Right?
final nail in the coffin, where it's like, you know what, I just can't do this on a weekly basis anymore.
Why? What happened? Did someone completely bungle the Royal Rumble match, or what happened?
Oh, you mean the aforementioned Shane McMahon?
There we go.
um, yeah, I think it was the Rumble where I finally was like, you know what, it's just not. I can't do this on a weekly basis. I can't devote 5 hours a week to this. Um, and part of it is because I have more important things to worry about now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so whereas before when it was just me and my wife, it was, whatever. I'll watch Raw, I'll watch SmackDown, and then whatever.
You've got the time.
I had the time, and now and even beyond that, then that wasn't even enough. Then I would, I was right before the network moved over to Peacock. I was I was doing my, Monday Night Wars rewatch. I was all,
Yeah.
and
I'd
so
come over to the house to podcast, and there'd be like a random Nitro from 1999 on, and just
yeah,
what are you doing to yourself,
yeah,
bud? Like,
yeah. But again, I don't even my time to actually watch wrestling is vastly decreased. But again, much like Matt, I am very online. So even if I'm not watching the shows, I'm usually on Twitter during the shows, so I see what all's going on. WWE especially is always tweeting out the clips of what just happened. So
yeah.
you really don't, other than the matches themselves, and the matches have never been, for me, the most important part of wrestling. On a weekly basis. Obviously, the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
That's what that. That's what.
You've seen you've seen the Miz wrestle on Raw enough to know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. Is I've watched wrestling for 35 years of my life. I know what I'm going to see on a weekly TV, even AEW. Like, I like a lot of it, but I don't need to watch every minute of every episode anymore because I've seen enough of it to know I don't really need to pay attention to every single move and moment of every show. Pay-per-views are different, but your Dynamites, your SmackDowns, you can skip a lot of that and still get the gist of it in today's day and age where you said clips are everywhere and there's a million ways to access them.
Right. So going forward, we're not gonna take up too much of anybody's time. Most importantly, our own. We're gonna do 20 to 30 minutes each week. Usually on Wednesdays. There's bound to be weeks where something happens and we won't be able to get together. But for the most part, it'll be on Wednesdays. The episodes will be out before Dynamite. So, if you're listening to it on a Thursday, just know anything that we talk about is information we had before Dynamite that night. And we're just going to talk about one or two things happening on screen in the wrestling world. You know, Matt and I were texting earlier about what exactly we wanted this version of the show to be, and I was like, I really don't want to talk about all the backstage, you know, stuff going on, especially when it's all speculatory. You know, last week there was the whole big thing on Twitter that WWE had already consummated a deal with the Saudis to sell the company, and it was this big thing for 12 hours on Twitter, and by the next morning it was all cleared up, and
yeah, once the legitimate news organizations got involved, they were like, no.
Yeah.
And
so, in that case, for example, the sale or new TV contracts for WWE, I'm sure once those things happen, we'll definitely have to talk about it. But until something official is out there, there's no need for either of us to drive ourselves crazy talking about the what ifs and what it would mean and all that kind of junk.
I guess I want to get knee deep into will Punk return or not. Let's just do it for 3 hours.
Sure.
There hasn't been enough talk
about
CM Punk.
Did you see the picture he posted with Brody King?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Great.
But yeah, I mean, we're gonna, try and keep it as light as possible. That's not always gonna be possible, as you'll see here in a couple minutes. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, wrestling is supposed to be fun, and I want to have fun talking about wrestling with one of my best friends again. So.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time to me, I guess.
Okay, cool. Glad we can agree on that.
Yeah.
That'll probably be about the only thing we agree on going forward.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see how cranky I get after I start picking up on more of the weekly happenings.
More of the Fed, yeah. And we'll try and balance it out. I mean, obviously after this, next week we'll probably dive deep in a Rumble preview, and the week after I have to talk about the fallout from the Rumble. But I want to balance it out. So yeah, it's probably going to be a little Fed heavy up through WrestleMania, but we will definitely. AEW's got some stuff going on too, so we definitely will weave some of that in there as well.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean that's it, and then we want to hear from you guys too. So if you want to leave, we're gonna put the videos up on my Music and Moonsaults channel that hopefully you're seeing right now, and then I think the audio is going to go back up on the old feed if we can figure out how to get into that. You got all that?
Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah, I've got all that, so we'll be able to get that figured out. It's just
cool.
Getting the file over to me.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's perfect. We'll talk about that off air. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to going down this road again with you, Matt.
Yeah, and I think it would be fun too if the viewers and listeners want to send something in to you, on your channel. That's something they want us to talk about, or they have thoughts of like, well, what do you think about so and so not winning the Rumble or whatever? We can do that too.
Yeah, thank you. That's where
I would almost rather like have that interaction.
Definitely.
Just because you and I sitting together and just bantering back and forth is great, but I also want to know what other people think, because I don't want to be in an echo chamber of just these are the things we care about.
Right. Yeah, I was getting there, and then I got sidetracked in my own thought pattern. Yeah, so leave a comment on this video, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at IbanezChris. There actually is a Twitter account for the show at KM Wrestling Pod. So you can even send us something on there too. And yeah, we wanna be as interactive as possible. So, yeah, this will be should be a good time. So
after this week, because we unfortunately have to discuss yesterday.
And I almost decided to punt, and we would start next week, but I figured no, we need to we can't just jump right in. I wanted to do an episode kind of telling people who we were and stuff like that before we jumped right into Rumble predictions and stuff like that next week. So we did that, but unfortunately, and for you and I, Matt, it was kind of like the highest of highs, lowest of lows, because like we were just talking, like we just found, you see my hat, we just found out that the Lions offensive coordinator, who was getting a lot of looks for a head coaching gig, that he's going to stick around for next year, which is big news for us. And so we were all riding high on that. And then like an hour later, I was back on Twitter and saw that Jay Briscoe passed away in a car accident last night. Matt was a ROH diehard back in the glory days. So he's going to be able to speak to this a lot better than I will be able to. Although I do, I got in, and that's the funny thing about the Briscoes is they pretty much, with the exception of the Usos and New Day, pretty much any major tag team of the last 20 years has crossed paths with the Briscoes.
Right.
I mean,
it's no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you name Motor City Machine Guns, the Young Bucks, Red Dragon, War Machine, FTR, they just had an awesome trilogy with them last year. The Kingdom,
world's greatest tag
team they've wrestled.
Kevin Steen and El Generico.
Yeah.
Tyler Black and Jimmy Jacobs. Seth Rollins.
Mm-hmm.
Just I mean, they were it. And the first Ring of Honor show I went to was Tag Wars 08, and the main event of that show is the Briscoe brothers versus Austin Aries and this Japanese guy that I actually ran into in the bathroom before the show, who I would later find out to be Kota Ibushi. And that match blew me away. I mean, it was spectacular. It's how I love tag team wrestling. Mm-hmm. I've said it for years. When it's done right, I think there's nothing better than tag team wrestling. And that whole show, Tag Wars, obviously, was based around it. So I really was enjoying the show. And then that match happened, and I was just blown away. And the Briscoes became, along with Nigel McGuinness, the two things that I absolutely loved about Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
And the Briscoes main event match is what made me fall in love with that company, and then helped lead me down the road of independent wrestling. So like literally, if it wasn't for me going to that show and watching those guys perform, my view of wrestling would be completely different.
Yeah. I started watching ROH really in like 2014. And I remember Matt would go to these shows and he'd tell me all these names, and I'd always, the running joke would be, once I get to, I'll pay attention to them once I get to WWE, and then I was, like I said, and one of the people he always told me about were the Briscoes, he goes, I remember you telling me about their entrance with "Give Me Back My Bullets" and all that stuff, and I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. But yeah, so I started watching in 2014, and I said it on Twitter last night. One of the first acts that popped out to me and really drew me in were the Briscoes. I mean, here are they're crazy looking chicken farmers, but they're just both like so charismatic. In fact, I remember you and I constantly last year leading up to the FTR match, the first FTR match.
Yeah.
The promo battles back and forth on Twitter that we posted, if you have never watched a Jay Briscoe brothers video, a promo that they film on their farm,
you're missing out.
It's so good. But yeah, and then even some of those ROH shows that we went to, the first one that comes to mind is Survival of the Fittest in 2014 in Toledo against the Addiction, Kazarian and Daniels. And it's one of those. I saw someone else say today that they had, they saw them wrestle the Young Bucks one time, and that the upon rewatch it was better in their mind than what it was to them at the time, but they always have the memory of being in that crowd during that match. And that's kind of how I feel about that match, is that if I went back and watched it, it probably doesn't hold up to the standing I have of it in my mind, but I just remember the counter that Kaz had out of the Doomsday
I was just gonna say, like, that memory, not just of that moment, but where we were sitting in the crowd is burnt into my head, because we were only a couple rows from the railing, and it's like clear as day I can still remember it.
And and then the other match from that year is that Final Battle, the fight without honor against Adam Cole for the ROH World Title. Like that, even as a big Adam Cole fan, like that was just fantastic stuff. So yeah, it sucks, and and the thing that sucks the most is, as much as it sucks for us fans, it sucks a million times more for his family. So just all the love out to them and the people that actually knew him. It's just a terrible, he's 38, gonna be 39. He's only a year or two older than me, and that just kind of like,
he's his same age as me.
Yeah,
2 daughters, around the same age as my kids.
Right.
And that's like, not to personalize it too much, but like I had a little bit of a hard time sleeping last night thinking about that stuff. It's like, as a wrestling fan, we unfortunately have kind of gotten used to like people passing too soon. But this is the first one that I can think of where like I'm able to directly correlate, like, yeah, I'm that age. Yeah, I have 2 kids. Yeah, I've just been driving down the road taking my kids to something. Like it kind of hits home a lot more. And then when you add in the fact that, like, you see all your favorite wrestlers, or not all of them, but quite a few of them, like pouring out their emotions and how great of a guy he was, that we didn't see as fans. And I have a personal story I'd like to share at some point before we get off here. But like, it's really tough to see that and know that not just like wrestling fans are upset. There's a whole, his family is going to be going through some stuff, and it's really, tough to think about.
It's just, man, it's just not good all the way around. And I wouldn't say I had a trouble sleeping, but I definitely, when my son went to bed last night, I definitely made sure, I squeezed him a little bit tighter when he gave me, the hug and kiss goodnight last night, just because you just never know, man. And it's just one more reminder of that. So
yeah. And it's a shame too that that him and his brother never really got their chance to show on an actual national stage how great they were.
I could have. I don't want to do a rant on the first episode, but I definitely could when it comes to that.
I was thinking about this earlier, and not trying to create controversy or anything, but like if their last name was Anawai, they would be in the consideration for the greatest tag team of all time. If they were competing on Raw and SmackDown for as long as the Usos have been, I don't think there would be anyone in the world that would argue with you that they've been the greatest tag team of the last 20 years. But because they did it in smaller arenas, they never got the love that they deserved as a team. And Jay, went on to have a great singles career too. I mean, he's a guy that could have been a star if he'd have just gotten that shot on national TV. It's really it's sad, but it's also like, I think now people are going to start to maybe appreciate him a little more, which it sucks that this is how that had to happen.
Yeah.
Or how it may happen.
Right. And we did, one of the best things about the WWE product over the last 6 months or so is they're more willing to acknowledge the outside wrestling world. Yeah. And so I don't know if you saw the clip, but they acknowledged it, Jay's passing, on air last night. In fact, I guess there was supposed to be some sort of funeral segment
Yeah, with the New Day.
And they axed it, which was, in a different time that probably wouldn't have happened. But even, you could see it even from some guys in, I saw a couple posts from the Big E. Big E was like,
Mm-hmm.
we studied their matches and quote unquote borrowed a lot of stuff from them. Like, so, they might not have like the big company backing, but it's clear that the people that are on those major stages on TV, that they left an imprint on all those people.
Yeah.
So their
it
legacy
would be
will live
interesting
on
to
that
hear.
way.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear, and maybe they'll do that, on Dynamite. But I don't think the Young Bucks would be where they're at without a team like the Briscoes coming along, 6-7 years before the Young Bucks really started to make a name for themselves. And yeah, their influence, you can see it across multiple companies and like I said, 2 decades of wrestling.
Seth Rollins flat out said last night on Twitter that if it weren't for the Briscoe, Jay and Mark, that Tyler Black doesn't get to become Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
So
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping someone tonight hits a neck breaker, and as they're turning the guy over, they ta 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 ta. So I'm sure tonight. That's what I'm looking for.
I'm
tonight.
Sure. So there'll be a Jay Driller or two as well.
Oh yeah,
I would imagine.
Yeah. Man, what a move. But you said you had a personal.
Yeah, real quick. So it was like 2000. I want to say it was 2009, 2010. I went to a Ring of Honor show in Chicago, and if anyone that's ever been,
Is this the Samoa Joe incident show?
No, that was a different show.
Okay,
that was a different show. We'll talk about that some other time. But if you've ever been to a show at the Frontier Fieldhouse in Chicago Ridge, it's like it's a gymnasium that's off of a main drag. So there's one road in and one road out, from what I know. And at the end of the road going out is a strip mall with like a pizzeria and a bar. And after the show, a buddy of mine and I went over to it was a couple of us actually. There's 4 of us. We went over to get some pizza and drinks, and we didn't know, but we thought, maybe the guys will come over. Sure enough, some of the wrestlers came in to eat and drink afterwards, and Jay was in the bar with his brother and a few of the guys, and I was wearing a Barry Sanders jersey, and he saw me in the bar and was walking by and stopped, and he was like, the man with the greatest, or with the jersey of the greatest running back in the history of the NFL. And he cut like a little promo about how Barry Sanders is the greatest player, or the greatest running back that ever played, and he didn't get enough credit. And then he just sat and talked football with us for like 3-4 minutes. It may not even have been that long, but he was just like totally just wanted to talk football with somebody, and made our night. Gave me an interaction with this guy who also happened to be one of my favorite wrestlers. And it wasn't like, here, let me pay to meet you, or
right.
Let me bother you in the bar. Like, he came up to us to just bullshit with some football fans. And it's like, now that I think about it like that, it was my little, man, this guy really was like just a nice dude from what everyone said about him. And I've got a little story of like, yeah, I got to meet him once completely, out of nowhere. And he was cool as shit. And he just wanted to talk football and talk about the Raiders. And like, it's too bad that more people aren't going to get a chance to do that with a guy like Jay Briscoe. I know on social media yesterday, a bunch of people were just sharing photos of like, I met him at this and he was the nicest guy. Like, yeah. And that's what's going to stick with me is everyone's saying so many great things about him, and he's gone.
Yeah. That's a bummer for sure. Well, is there anything else?
I don't have anything. It just, rest in peace, Jay Briscoe. Wrestling world's going to miss you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know how you transition out of that, but to do plugs, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's just, like I said, subscribe here on YouTube or to the Kris and Matt's Wrestling podcast feed on all your different podcast platforms. We'll post the links both on the show's Twitter account at KM Wrestling Pod, I'll post them on my Twitter as well at IbanezChris. And yeah, like I said, just let us know what you think, and like I said, we want you to be as much a part of the show as Matt and I are. So yeah.
Yeah, send us in a couple of your own predictions on who you think's going to win the Rumble, and maybe we can discuss those chances, or who you don't want to see the Rumble. There's one gentleman in particular I really don't want to see win the Royal Rumble, and we'll talk about that next week. So let us know who you're hoping for, who you're pulling for.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it then for this week's edition of the Kris and Matt's Wrestling Podcast 2.0. Until next time, guys, reach for the sky, boy.